One of the important keys to perception is the language that one uses. It's difficult to feel psychologically safe when the language used to transmit safety information doesn't match the language you understand best. We'll talk with a safety professional who specializes in bridging the language divide up next on this episode of the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. From Flourish DX, this is the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. Safety at work is more than freedom from physical injury. To be safe, you have to feel safe. Join us each week as we discuss psychologically healthy and safe work in the USA. Welcome to this week's Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. I'm your host, Dr. I. David Daniels, and I want to thank you for tuning in. Each week, we seek to increase awareness of the importance of psychological health and safety by learning from the lived experience, research, and expertise of our guests, as well as advocating strategies to reduce harm and minimize vulnerability to psychosocial hazards in the American workplace. The number of Hispanic workers in the labor force has grown from 10.7 million in 1990 to 29 million in 2020 and is projected to reach 35.9 million in 2030. Hispanics are projected to account for 78% of net new workers in the next decade. So the Hispanic proportion of the workforce has increased from 8.5% in 1990 to 18% in 2020. And the Bureau of Labor Statistics projects that Hispanics will account for 1 out of every 5 workers in the labor force at somewhere around 21%. So this, and you'll find in terms of Hispanic workers, they're highly represented in farming, fishing, forestry at about 43%. Second place is building and grounds, cleaning and maintenance at 37.9%, followed by construction at 35.7%. So Hispanic workers are a significant percentage of the workforce. And they're also a significant portion of the workforce in extremely hazardous jobs. So that suggests it's important for organizations who feel it important to hire Hispanic workers, that they be able to provide the information to keep Hispanic workers safe in a language that the worker will understand. So let's not presuppose that all Hispanic workers don't speak English. So let's fix that right up front. But what I'm suggesting is there are many Hispanic workers. As a matter of fact, there are many Hispanic workers who don't quote unquote look Hispanic, because it's kind of hard to tell looking at people the country that they come from, the language that's being spoken in their home. So we're kind of using the Hispanic worker as kind of a metaphor for the fact that in the workplace, if we expect people to be safe, to feel safe, that they're going to have to get that information in a language that they understand. And so I thought today, in this episode, it would be wonderful to have someone who understands that concept and is actually helping organizations bridge the divide between, again, predominantly English-speaking types of businesses who hire workers who don't always speak English or don't understand it as clearly, and then all their information tends to be in English. So I met our guest. As a matter of fact, I tuned in to hear her provide some wisdom in this arena, and I thought I got to get her on. And so I'm very fortunate today to have Yara Carrillo. She's going to be joining me today. And my first question is, so who is Yara Carrillo?
Hi, Dr. Daniels. Thanks for having me. Well, I am a wife and a mom, 4 months, and I am a chemical engineer by training and a safety professional by profession. I do a lot of work, I do consulting. I do environmental health and safety consulting. And a lot of the work that I do is actually with the Hispanic population. I don't only work with Hispanics, right? But quite a bit of the work I do, maybe a third, sometimes half of the things I do are with Hispanic folks or Spanish-speaking folks. I have done training, coaching, translating documents, putting programs together, in Spanish, translating entire programs or documents to be provided in Spanish. And I very much enjoy what I do.
Absolutely. But so tell me another. So the first two things I ask people when they come on are always the same. I ask who the person is, and the next question I ask is, what does psychological health and safety? When you hear that, what does that mean to you?
Well, I'll say it's a smart thing to do. Is a good thing to do for an employer. I will start saying that. I also will say that it's a way to protect the employees from those hazards that are not necessarily visible or tangible, okay? But they're still there.
Right. Right.
So humanly, I guess human nature is that if you don't see something, you tend to think that it doesn't exist.
Right.
So this is not the truth for psychological health and safety, for psychological hazards. Okay.
Yes.
They're not visible, right? They're not tangible, but they do exist and they can still kill you, believe it or not. And they can still cause a lot of harm. They can still cause incidents that are physically visible. So what it is for me is something that's smart to do in a nutshell. And again, it's a way to protect the employees from these non-visible, non-tangible hazards.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So how does a chemical engineer end up as a health and safety professional? How does that work?
Well, you'll be surprised how many colleagues are in this arena. You'll be surprised. I started my career, this is like 15 years ago, in the quality assurance, quality control area. That's what I started doing. So while doing that, I started noticing a lot of safety gaps and nobody was taking care of them. Right. And in some way, I was exposed myself to these hazards and also other people in the plant. Right. So I started kind of digging into that. I remember the first thing I did where there were some safety hazards that were not being addressed. We didn't even have fire extinguishers. Nobody knew about that. So I started, talking to the fire department and they kind of guided me on what to do. So that was like my first thing I ever did in 2008 while I was doing an internship in a plant. Later on, when I was working for a big organization, big corporate American, they were all about safety. They were big on safety. And that just got my attention. I thought this is so cool. I thought at the moment, this is so cool. I might as well do this instead, And I guess one of the things that got my attention was the people interaction. I thought you can make a change right there on the spot. And I'm not saying the quality assurance, the quality control is not important because in a way, you're protecting the safety of the product and then ultimately the safety of the patient, of the people, if you're going to take a medication, that it's for a condition and illnesses that a person has, that medication better not be contaminated and worsen the condition, right?
Yes.
So it is important. It is important. But I guess what I enjoy about safety and health is, again, the human interaction, and is that you can make a difference and educate a person right on the spot. And believe it or not, that person's life can be changed. Yes. I believe what we do is important and has that much relevance that a person can understand and differentiate when a hazard exists and it doesn't exist. And that can save their life, or save them from a big injury. Yes. So I ended up here because I guess safety found me, right? I got really drawn, really interested into it. And back in the days, for this organization, we had a safety manager, and I talked to him. He was a chemical engineer, Danny 10. Yeah. He's now, I guess he's working towards either his master, his PhD, something like that. But he continued his career, right? So we're talking, and he did a training for us, and he said that he was a chemical engineer. And I thought, this is so cool. So I talked to him and I asked him, hey, would you ever need a volunteer? Would you ever need some help? And he's like, yeah, I can sure use some help. He needed to do some noise surveys and he needed to do some chemical exposure surveys. Some of the employees were working with acetone and can't remember what else it was. I guess some kind of alcohol. So I talked to my supervisor back then, and she agreed for me to do it. And then we did some confined space assessment. Then we did some chemical inventory. And from there, my next job that I looked for was actually as a safety specialist. So I went from being an auditor, and then I went to the bottom of safety. I started, I took a big pay cut back then, but don't regret it at all. I'm so glad I did it, Yeah. So that's how I ended up here. A lot of chemical engineers also do PSM, PHA and such. Yeah. For chemical safety, right? Makes sense. So a lot of chemical engineers dedicate to just that, or a lot of them, do PSM and PHAs, and they also do the other parts of safety. Yeah.
Okay. And for those who may be that's project safety management, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, sir. Yeah, for chemical plants and flammable, after certain amounts, there is a standard, right? The process safety management
process
standard.
Yes.
Process safety management standard. And so whenever there's a list and a table of these products, these chemical products and the amounts. So if you hold certain products and certain amounts, PSM applies to you.
Yes.
And then PHAs, which is the process safety, the assessment, right, is when you go and see the pipes. Then is when the engineering part comes in, right? You see the drawings, you see the layouts, and you go see the pipe, the valves, and you do a what if analysis. What will happen if this pipe bursts and you have gasoline, right? Then you do your analysis. Yeah.
Right.
And then there's some other chemicals, there's things that if the pipe is compromised or the valve is compromised and it gets to the atmosphere, such as ammonia, it can be a disaster, right? So then is when the chemical and the engineering part comes in. Yeah.
Yes. Well, you bring back, you make me think about a couple of things. First of all, it's always an honor to have one of the smart kids on with me.
Who is that? That would say the doctor, right? That
would be you. I actually have one of my nieces that is going to be a chemical engineer, and she's minoring in math. So she's a smart kid in our family. So, but
again, said the PhD.
Well, anyway, but there's an interesting connection. So I in some of my back in the day when I was in the fire rescue service, I was a member of the hazmat team. So
I remember that.
We would be the folks that show up after someone didn't do the things you talked about. They didn't do the process safety management. They didn't follow the rules, and then they call us to come out and try to do something with it,
mitigate
which often.
Disaster. Yeah.
Absolutely. Often there's not a whole lot that can be done after the fact. But the thing that I think about and the connection to the topic around psychological health and safety is what you just shared is there are standards in place, many of them that have been in place since certainly the late 70s and 80s, that if this chemical is present and if it's present in a certain amount, you have to plan for what will happen if things go wrong. But what if we took that same perspective around psychological and psychosocial hazards? What if, again, like 30 other countries do, what if this hazard is present, you should be trying to figure out what will happen if things go wrong from a mental health, psychological, and psychosocial perspective? What might that look like? I mean, just think about that.
Some chemicals are silent killers, like carbon dioxide. You don't smell it, you don't see it. Next thing you know, you hit the floor, you're done.
Yes.
So are the psychological hazards.
Yes.
And that's why we have these atmosphere detectors to tell us what, the carbon monoxide is present, because we don't see it, we don't smell it.
Right.
In the psychological safety, when you have these flags, if someone is making your life hard at work, right? If someone's calling you names, is having this type of attitudes, those flags should raise concern in the people who are in charge of the workers' psychological safety. Just like we have this atmosphere monitors beeping and saying, get out of that confined space or you're going to die, right? Those flags should raise a big concern, there should be no tolerance for this type of situations. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So what, in your opinion, how does language come into this for you? I mean, is it possible that the inability to understand what's being shared is the hazard or a hazard in and of itself? What do you think about that?
Of course it is. Of
Okay.
course.
Share more.
Yeah. So, first thing that comes to mind, about a month ago, I did an asbestos worker training. It's a week-long training for some asbestos workers, right? That only they speak some English. So I like what you said at the beginning. It is probably a myth or a misconception thinking that all Hispanic don't speak English. That's not true, right? For some of us, English is second language. And yes, we speak it with an accent because it's not our first language, right? But we speak it to a point where we are comfortable with the language. We are proficient. We can write documents. We can talk to other people, right? We're good. There's our Hispanics that are born here, and English is their first language, along with Hispanic. With Spanish. They grow up or they're raised speaking both languages. Just my kids, we speak Spanish at home and at school and everywhere else is English. So they that is like natural for them.
Mm-hmm.
There are Hispanic that speak some English, right? Like they can do work professionally, but when it comes to the details, to the nuts and bolts, then is when can be, misunderstandings, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are some other Hispanics that don't speak English at all, right? Or speak very minimum, right? So this group of people, this group of workers that I did the training for, they were kind of in the third category that I just mentioned. They speak English to a certain level, right? That they can do the day-to-day things, but when it comes to details, they might miss something. They might miss a couple of things,
Right.
So does language play a role? Let's think about this. I mean, it is the employer best interest to get all workers to understand all the details, the nuts and bolts when it comes to safety.
Mm-hmm.
Because the employer is liable for those employees. They're responsible for them.
Right.
Okay? They got to think of the worst case scenario and think, can I stand in court and say, I provided this worker absolutely everything they needed to be safe? Equipment, education, administrative controls, engineering controls, everything they needed. Can I stand in court and say that? And that is something I usually say to my clients when the question rises, do I need to provide this in Spanish? And I say, well, do all your Hispanic workers speak English to a level that they don't need it in Spanish? If that's the case, then no, because it might be workers that, like I'm saying, they speak English to a level that it doesn't matter what language it is provided on. Fine, right?
Right.
The thing is, when you have workers that might miss the details, and those details could be the ones who cause an incident later.
That's right.
So the point I want to make, I kind of sidetrack with my story about the asbestos training, but so I did this training, and the workers told me, the union was giving us this training in English. And then I went to a site and I was helping, but I was outside the containment. So he was not removing the asbestos. He was not inside the area because he was not trained. He was outside helping with some other stuff. And so his company said, we want to get you trained so you can actually be, inside the containment and doing the abatement and the asbestos demolition. So the union sent him. The training was in English. And he said, wait a second. I believe this is important. My health is on the line here. I see that these guys are showering after work. They're scrubbing their face. This must be some kind of a big deal. I would like to request this in Spanish. And I told him, good for you.
Yes.
Good for you, yes. Because yes, it is a big deal when your health is on the line.
Yes.
And yes. One of them told me, I was getting some information, but I was not like sinking on it, and I guess that was an aha moment to me, like thinking, yeah, do you want your workers to just kind of get the idea of it? Or do you want your workers to really be experts to tell you this is what happened in your system if you inhale asbestos?
Yes.
This is why it's important to protect yourself. This is why it's important that the air circulation is being changed 4 times an hour. This is why it's important to wear a Tyvek suit and a respirator, because the fibers will do this. Do you want your workers to kind of sort of know what it is, or do you want them to be experts
Right.
on this?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So language to me, doctor, can come in many language to me is not just English, Spanish, Italian, French. Music is a language. We talk with our hands, especially Hispanic. We talk with our hands. But we talk with our faces.
Yes.
It's very different if you approach a worker and you tell them, hey, can you please print a label for me? Do me a favor, print a label for me, bring it to my office, right? And it's very different if you're approaching them, hey, print a label, bring it to my office.
Right.
Right?
Right.
It's
Right.
also different if you kind of try to fake the niceness and say, hey, we'll try to print a label for me and bring it to my office. And you're making faces and you're faking it. Those are forms of language too.
They are.
They
are.
Even within English or in Spanish. So language is, to me, the way how you communicate something, right?
Yeah, there's a model of communication I recall from at some point back in the day. It talks about that. So there's a sender, there's a message, there's a medium, there's a receiver, and then there's feedback. And all five of those are important. And any one of those can be if you take one of those out, then the communication is broken or lost.
It's broken.
And I could actually make the argument that you don't have to be an expert, but you do have to know enough not to get yourself sick or killed. So just because, you don't have, a long line of degrees or you don't have a bunch of certifications on a topic. And I think sometimes when I hang out with some of my health and safety friends, I think sometimes even from a safety perspective, we talk up here, a bunch of really long sentences and really complicated words to workers who don't have any idea what we're talking about, if it's in English or Spanish or whatever language, because it's not something you could expect that worker to necessarily understand. Job hazard analysis should include communication, because that is a hazard in and of itself. If we can't communicate back and forth. So again, back to my fire rescue days, there were times we had to do things by hand signals because you can't really hear. It's too loud. You certainly can't see because it's too dark. You had to do things by touching each other. So communication should be specific to the work that we're trying to get done at the time. And if our languages are different, do I necessarily have to be able to speak Spanish? Not necessarily, but I do have to be able to communicate to that other person about specific hazards, about specific things, about specific situations, because you need to know when I do this, you stop. You see what I mean? And that's sometimes we try to make that very complex process almost too simple to go, well, just get somebody just to get a translator who doesn't know safety isn't necessarily as effective as someone as yourself who understands both the language and the topic. They're both important.
And, we've done trainings, doctor, where we had an employee who speaks pretty much no English with another employee who speaks no Spanish. And we've managed to do the training by on the job observing what the other guy's doing.
Yes.
And like in trenching, you say, okay, you're going to put your escape, your ladders every 25 feet. And they just say, okay, watch what I'm doing. And then you repeat what I'm doing. Especially on the trades. And the trades, you learn by doing, observing, and then you try to do it. So there has to be an opportunity, like you say, to provide feedback. So then is when probably the language element becomes that relevant, right? When doesn't have to be all the workers, but as long as you have maybe one, in the crew who can communicate with the rest of the crew and provide feedback, and they can raise their concerns. That's right. I've found to be very helpful.
That's right. Yeah. I do my best to try to assume positive intent with virtually everybody. I really do. That also has caused me to get burned in some situations because I always assume that people are going to do the right thing until they give me some indication that they're not. So I believe that there are a lot of employers out there who are looking for good workers, and it really doesn't matter to them whether or not they speak English or Spanish or French or Creole or whatever it is. It doesn't matter. because they're not going to. They perhaps may not treat them any different, and they're going to do whatever they can. So in those situations where people are trying to just be good employers, it's really essential to make sure that you haven't overlooked something because you never thought about it. It just didn't come up for you. But on the other hand, there are some people out there, I believe, that are intentionally, they look for people who don't understand intentionally because they're easier to exploit. They're easier to get someone to do this job because they don't know about the hazards. And that really, that kind of makes me a little angry sometimes. Yeah. And I have to control my emotions around because I really don't, I'm not into seeing people exploit it. Mm-hmm. And so in some cases, I really think that's where the rules are so important. And OSHA tells us that you have to communicate safety related information in a language that the worker will understand. So you hired these folks. It's not their fault that they don't speak the same language or the same
Correct.
level of language that you do.
Correct.
You hired them, and it's your job to make sure that the information is communicated to them in a way that they're going to understand.
That is correct. We have to stop blaming the workers, right? For things that they do and for the things that they are. Because, I mean, in this case, this is just, you were born in a place where that was the language that was spoken. It's not something that you choose, It's not something that you consciously make an election for. So I am right there with you. You say that the employer hired this person. So they have to be able to not only benefit from the profit that this person's going to bring to the company by doing their work, but also you get the whole packet. You hire this person's going to work for you, make money for you, then be responsible with them, protect them and make sure they understand all the details. Yes. Accommodate these needs for them. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, yes. It ought to be about, and frankly, I just believe it is smarter. It is actually better for your bottom line because it is really difficult to replace good human beings. It really is. I mean, it's not that you can't do it, but it's kind of hard. It's hard to
especially when they're tenure and all that.
Yes.
I'll tell you a little story. So I work in a plant where we had like production lines, right? So we had about 2 or 3 operators per line. There was one line. We have one worker who was very limited in English. And he had been working there for I want to say back then it was 15 years. Yes. He's still there. So he's been more than 20 years. So someone is being operating a machine, bringing a life for 20 years. That guy is as expert as it gets. Okay.
That's right.
He does that every day for at least 8 hours a day. That guy is an outstanding employee. I remember him. His name is Miguel. Mm-hmm. Right? He was never late, always on time, from lunch, from break. He was just there to work. You know what I mean? And he had some limitations. I remember one time we paired him with another 2 operators and the production gave them the goal, right? Okay, this is how many pounds of this product you need to put through the line. I'm not kidding you. They doubled the production that day. It was a very simple product. I remember it was like a one-shot thing, one cut. It was a machine that cut stuff, but they doubled the production. So in that sense, the company is benefiting, right? From them, from, let's say, this employee, Miguel. Because he's making money for them. He's doubling the production, and every pound of this product they get put on the market, they would sell.
Yes.
So why not accommodate this person? How much is that going to cost you? To get another person, another extra 15 minutes to give them directions.
That's
How much is that going to cost? $100?
That's,
if $200? If
yes.
that, exactly.
If that. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So the guy, he was, often, he talked to me quite a bit when he had concerns. He will, we talk quite a bit. And when I did my rounds on the floor, sometimes we could chat, hey, how's it going? So when people see that opportunity, when people see that openness in the company, hey, there's a person that I can talk to from management or from safety, they feel comfortable. They feel that they're heard,
yes.
Hi listeners, Jason here. We hope you're enjoying this latest podcast episode. Now, if you're like Joelle, Alicia and myself and enjoy learning from the best, then the Flourish DX Academy is for you. The Academy includes free e-learning courses on the ISO 45003 standard for psychological health and safety at work, and associated topics such as how to conduct a psychosocial risk assessment and how to create the business case for psych health and safety. All courses feature high-quality videos, downloadable resources, multi-choice questions, and a downloadable training certificate on completion. Take your learning to the next level with all FlourishDX Academy courses included within the FlourishDX mobile app. Select podcast episodes from the Psych Health and Safety podcast and sister podcasts from Canada and the USA are also included. Get started with FlourishDX for free at www.flourishdx.com/get-started. That's www.flourishdx.com/get-started. Now back to this episode.
Yes. Yeah, there's particularly post-pandemic, there is a bit of a fad out there these days. Folks have taken Dr. Amy Edmondson's work on psychological safety and turned it into a kind of a cottage industry. So there's folks that, we just need to have psychological safety and people need to be able to bring their whole selves to work until the person speaks a different language, until the person shows, a different level of education, until they find out that the person doesn't have the same socioeconomic status. And then all of a sudden, we don't want that part. So if you're really into psychological safety, whole person means just that, whole person, the language that they speak, the food that they eat, the kids that they have or don't have, the faith traditions they have or don't have, the person they love or don't. All of that person comes to work, all of that person. And if you bring all of that person, you need to be able to figure out a way to get the best out of that whole person, which means sometimes if the languages don't line up, you help them line up. You figure out ways to work around it. We would do that for the machines.
There you go.
We do it for the machines all of the time. We make, we'll make modifications that cause these machines to work. It's cold outside. We put a different kind of the starter fluid in the machine. But the humans, often we come up with this, they have to be this particular way. And if they aren't going to be this kind of way, we need to find a new person. Well, good luck with that.
Now in the job market is tough, but I'll tell you something. There's jobs, and I understand this. There's jobs that you need to speak English. Okay,
absolutely.
I get it, right? If you're gonna be a teacher, I don't know. I can think of so many of them, but or a lawyer, right? Yeah, you need to know the language, but not for all the jobs. Like trade jobs, you don't necessarily, need to know everything. You need to know some of it to get by. You need to know.
Yes. And frankly, I'm pretty convinced there is not a job. So people have put limitations on jobs, and most of the limitations are artificial in nature. They are. And all you've done is cut yourself off from a great worker or from a great customer that you've decided. And what I'd rather be, I was having this conversation with some friends here recently. I would rather some organizations just be out with it and say, look, we don't want Hispanic people to work here, or we don't want to sell our product to Hispanic people. Just say that because you created an environment that makes it feel that way. You hire me.
If you say it would be illegal.
Of course it would be illegal. So of course it would be illegal. So what people do is they say it, to tick the box and say that they're equal opportunity, but they really don't mean it because there aren't systems in place to actually cause it to happen. And so, I realize that, the lawyers out there, their heads are exploding when I say that, but I'm not a lawyer. But I just think people ought to be honest about that so workers could really make a decision whether or not they wanted to work. What would happen if there was a sign out front that said, we really don't treat people, equally here? Because, we just don't. We treat certain people a certain way and we want them to work and we don't want other people who aren't this way. Again, it would be better for that organization because ultimately you get people to come in with all of the fancy, oh yes, we treat everybody the same. And, we really care about the folks who work here. We have a culture to care for people until it comes down to the fact that, I don't really understand what that person just said.
Or I want to tell something. I want to express myself and nobody can help me.
That's right. That's right.
And a lot of that, doctor, I will speak now as an employee, like things that I've been through. Along with this, a lot of this is not just provide a translator, provide a person who can talk to you in your language and accommodate. a lot of that, doctor, it's how you are treated. You're talking about how you treat people. I've been made fun of because of my accent. Okay. I've been made fun of because I don't know certain slangs, right? That are particular to an area. I had a coworker one time where I told her, hey, you got to stop, man. You got to stop this. I speak 3 languages. It's, I'm not ashamed of my accent at all.
Yes.
You only speak one, dude.
Right.
Right. And then this guy, I remember he told me, he was a coworker of mine. He was also a manager, and he was making fun of me, with another guy, with my manager. Now that I remember. Yeah, it was my peer and my manager. And what got me fired up that one time is that they thought I wasn't understanding. And I'm like, dude, I write documents for you. I do presentations. How you think I don't understand this? I don't understand some slangs, right? Some, like I'm saying, phrases are very particular. So they're making fun of me. And I tell him, you got to stop or I'm going to HR. And this guy goes like, oh, I'm sorry. I'm just not polished. I'm not, that well polished. I'm not well spoken. And I said, well, then you're going to have to get well spoken because you need to respect me. You don't need to invite me to your kids' birthday parties. You don't need to love me. You don't need to go shopping with me, but you need to respect me while we're here. And then all of a sudden it stopped. All of a sudden it just stopped. So sometimes we also have to step up, and say, hey, you need to abide by what you're saying. If you say that you're an equal opportunity employer, then let it be. Then do so. Yes. Okay? Yeah. Then treat me as you treat somebody else. Because if another employee comes and don't understand what you're saying, because it's guys talk, they talk about like sports sometimes, like football and these things. And no, women understand that, right? Yes. Hispanic or not. Yes. Will you still make fun of them? Why are you making fun of me? Things like that. Yeah. Yeah.
I actually find it kind of comical that the guy who barely made it through high school, is making fun of the chemical engineer. I also find that quite curious.
No, this guy was an MBA. This guy was an MBA.
Yeah. But I just don't understand how, people can fix themselves. We are both in this organization or this group for a reason. We both have a role to play, and no one's role is more or less important. Otherwise, why do we have it? I mean, just because you're the CEO or the person who cleans the bathrooms, both of them are important. Otherwise, why do we have people doing that work? Absolutely. And no one should be made to feel that their role is not important if you took the time to, because that actually makes you look bad. Not them, you. That if you can't figure out that this person this human being has value, what did you hire him for in the first place? A lot of this I do put on the folks who have the organizational power. But to your point, Yara, I think it's really important that we help folks understand the power that they bring, because you are, as the worker, you're what makes that organization function. Because if the owner, boss people, whoever they are, didn't need workers, they wouldn't have hired you in the first place. And it's important that you recognize the power that you bring and the importance that you bring to whatever it is, because the boss can take off for a couple of weeks. People like you generally can't. That's why they're so essential. Absolutely.
Operators need to keep the machine going.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
And you have a line down and it's a big deal.
That's right.
The CEO is out and nobody even noticed.
That's exactly right.
Who is the CEO?
That's right. Yeah. But to your point about, and when that happens, to your point about bringing that up, and what I tell people is, and bring it up the first time it happens, not the 8th time or the 15th time. The first time, so when we talk about, so the psychosocial hazard we know the most about in the United States is bullying, workplace bullying. And unfortunately, what folks will do is someone will say something, whether it be intended or not intended to offend another person. I'll feel something and I don't say anything right then, the first time it comes up. And I believe that's the kind of culture we should have in organizations, where the first time it should be safe enough for me to say, when you said that, it made me feel this kind of way. Was that what you intended? And often what we'll find is that the person, because we don't know each other, because we haven't worked together, it wasn't their intent to do that. And if I bring it up, it can be corrected right then. But there are other cases where people did intend it, and if you continue to allow them to do it, they'll do it more.
Yeah,
they'll do it more. So I believe that folks need, as you did, speak up right then and say, hold up. That doesn't work for me. I need you to communicate in this kind of way, or with this kind of, kind of mannerisms or what have you, because it's what works for me. I just think that's really, really important. Yeah.
Let's meet halfway somehow.
Absolutely.
But I, as a younger professional, at the beginning of my career, and when I moved to California, which is here where I live, I was, I want to say, afraid to speak. Yeah, I didn't want to cause trouble. I didn't want to rock the boat and be the one who's complaining and all that. And a few times I put up with even insults and name calling, until one time it had been, I remember, about 8 months of this person calling me hard-headed, saying, you don't understand. And she was training me in something. And this employee had been at this company for a long time, like over 20 years. Of course, she was an expert. She had been doing the job for 20 years. I had been there for like a couple months, 8 months by the end of the time I complained. So I remember that causing a lot of stress to me. I remember getting up and thinking, I don't want to go and see her. I don't want to go and just spend, 4-6 hours of my shift with her, and she's going to be yelling at me. I was so stressed. I remember being very stressed. So it reached to a point that it was affecting me, not just mentally, but physically.
Wow.
Okay. I was getting like my blood pressure being high and all this. So I said, okay, I need to do something. I need to figure something out. So I went and talked to HR, and this is almost 10 years ago. And HR told me, I wish you would have said something sooner, because she's been doing it to other people too.
Right.
So they talked to her right there, and they gave her, an ultimatum, and told, you need to stop this now. So I was glad that the company, stand by me, and they say, if your coworker is telling you that that is uncomfortable for her, that is offensive for her, you need to stop. Because I remember this coworker back then saying, I didn't mean harm. I didn't intend any harm. This is just how I talk. This is just how, I conduct myself. And so they told her, if your coworker is telling you that this is offensive for them, you need to stop. You just need to find a different way.
Find a different way. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it stopped right there.
Yes. Yes. Well,
8 months of grieving.
Well, yes. Yes. I think a lot of the courage that people need has to come in the orientation to the company itself, or to the organization itself, because you should be told on day one, the things that are going to keep you safe, both physically safe, emotionally safe. And if the company, organization, group, whoever they are, if they do have, standards around, we don't bully and mistreat each other, workers should be told on day one, we don't do that here. Now, but I was reading an article here recently that, again, is a little bit more honest about that. While the policy may be in place, if the organization would simply say, no, look, you're going to find people. We have a really big organization, and sometimes they forget, sometimes they don't intend it. But this is what you do if something doesn't feel right to you, this is how you should respond and who you should go to next. The same way you explain their health insurance and, how to fill out their time card. People should be given that information up front. And then that would have helped someone like you on day one if you were told that, because you think, well, I don't have to put up this for 8 months. And this is actually where I'm really loving watching Gen Zers. The people are like in their 20s.
Yeah.
They're not going to put up with it. They're not. And I the ones that I know, they're not going to put up with it, to the extent that if you do it and you don't fix it right away, they'll quit today, even without another job. They're just
Mm-hmm.
leaving. And I absolutely respect people who know their own worth and know what they know how they feel and are comfortable enough just to say, look, that just doesn't work for me. It doesn't.
Yeah.
I'm a good worker. I'll do great work for you, but there's some things I need from you as well. Yeah, that's
It's a
really important.
two-way relationship.
It
I agree on
is.
that. It's a
It
two-way
is.
relationship. And this is exactly what I told other people in the past. Because I had employees coming to me and saying, my supervisor just yelled at me. And
Mm.
I myself encourage people and say, we are going to go to HR right now.
Yes.
You go
Yes.
tell your supervisor this. Oh, I'm going to go tell him, excuse me, sir, I'm going to take this operator to the office. We'll be back in a moment.
Sure. Yes.
Because sometimes, we don't find the courage, because in my mind, back in the days, like I'm saying, I didn't want to cause any trouble. I just didn't want to go to work, get my job done, get my paycheck, go home. I didn't want to get into trouble and all that. But what happens with someone is pulling you into trouble, and that is to the detriment into your own health, mental health. And like I'm saying, it can get so bad that it can even affect your physical health.
Yes.
It can make you so miserable.
Yes.
So my advice is know your value. Know that you're bringing value to your employer. You are needed to run a machine, to, sweep a bathroom. If you're a housekeeper, you are needed to keep the room clean. If you're a front desk, you need to answer that phone. You bring some value and profit to the company. It is a two-way relationship. Okay. It's, they need to be accommodating to your needs as well. And they need to hear you. And if they don't hear you, then you don't want to work for them anyways.
Yes. Yes.
I had, there was a lady in church. She had been a stay-home mom for a very long time, and she was trying to go back to the workforce now that her kids are grown and all that. And I was helping her with her resume. And she's like, I haven't been out the workforce for so long, and the only work that I've done is volunteering at a church, doing some admin work and helping with events. And I said, that works. Let's put it in the resume. And she's like, well, how about if they don't like me going to church, and if I put their, First Baptist Church, and I said, then you don't want to work for them anyways.
Right. That's right.
If they say, well, so you're one of those church people, then say, well, no, thank you. This is who I am. Right. Even if they don't want you for who you are, I don't think that would be a good place for you.
That's right.
Because it is a two-way relationship. It would be the same as me, getting a friend and getting to know someone and say, well, I want us to be friends, but I don't like this and this and this and that about you. Right? So I might not agree 100% with all my friends, but the fact that we're friends is because we accept each other no matter what we are.
That's exactly right. Yes.
So my employer, in the same way, they can just benefit from me and get my 8 hours or more a day and make their profit, and then not pay attention to my concerns. We're not a doormat.
Yes.
We need to raise our concerns and speak up in a respectful manner.
Sure.
Because that's another thing. If we need to, voice our concerns, we need to be respectful as well. We don't need to disrespect them when we are raising our voice. Yes. Right? So I will just say that to any, I was going to say to any younger professional, but it sounds like the younger ones are the ones stepping up, huh? And us millennial and older,
Yeah, I think, I think many of them, again, just in the conversations that I've had, I think many of them have watched their older brothers and sisters and parents be stressed out and mistreated and disrespected in their work for years. And they've just decided, I don't want to do that. And they have so many more options now, I mean, they can get on YouTube and frankly create their own whatever, and someone will probably follow them, and folks can kind of laugh and snicker all they want. But there are people who've decided that I'm going to live in my car and make YouTube videos, and that's good for me. That's all I need. So, and I think I actually enjoy the idea that people are as a society. Again, I just can talk about here in the U.S. Folks are starting to decide that quote unquote American dream wasn't really one for me, and I've created my own dream. And you're not going to continue to convince me that there's something wrong with me and the wrong with the things that I want to do, because I have ways of doing them now. So get out of my way. I'm going to do it. Are you going with me or not? That's just kind of the way it is. So as we bring our conversation to a close, I wanted to have you share, if there are folks out there who they're kind of struggling with, some of the companies and organizations you've worked with, they're struggling with trying to bridge this divide of, a lot of it's a cultural divide, but particularly around having folks who can translate for them. Basically, how can people meet you, get to know you, get perhaps even work with you if they're having some similar challenges in their organization?
Thank you for that. Yeah, well, I'm in LinkedIn. They can find me on LinkedIn as Yara Carrillo. I also have a podcast in Spanish, right? You know that. It is focused on environmental health and safety. It is the first podcast in Spanish in the United States. I also put that material out there in Spanish. Their educational material. My concept is different. It's shorter podcast, 15, 20 minutes or less. When we talk about, a topic, let's talk about ladder safety or fire safety or chemical safety, and they can listen to that on their way to work. That is my concept. So it's out there. I'm in all platforms, Amazon, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and it's free. I'm in LinkedIn. I already say, the name of my podcast. The name of my podcast is Seguridad en Mente, Safety in Mind.
Okay.
And, yeah.
You'll certainly have to send me a link, because again, when this episode of the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast comes out, we want to make sure that we highlight the fact that that you have some information for those who would like to get the information in Spanish, because it's important. It's important. It's important.
And I'm open for business. Like you say, they can find me on LinkedIn, or they can reach out to you, huh? And
yeah, sure.
you can send them my way.
I'm happy to connect folks. Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
And I'm happy to help that. I would say there's also a lot of resources out there. There is Google Translate these days, doctor, that if you don't have anybody around and you need to communicate something, let's just type it and it showed there. Right. I know my mom doesn't speak any word of English at all. Okay. And I know she went to the hospital the other day, and a doctor did that. A doctor got a phone and he was typing it and he put it on Google, and Google, like, the phone was like talking to her, right?
Really?
And he got his point across,
Absolutely.
It was not an appointment. It was something else that she was there for. But they got through it. Yeah.
Yes.
There's a lot of technology and resources these days,
That's right.
But I'll say that doesn't replace the human interaction. Interaction is best.
That's right.
So to the best of their abilities, try to find someone that you don't just check the box, but someone that your employees can trust.
Yes.
Someone that your employees say, yes, I have a person that I can go to and talk about this. I feel that I have been given this space, this safe space, this opportunity, and I can definitely voice my concerns.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, Yara, thank you so much for spending some time with me. And I this is just, it's really cool when I find people that I feel are kindred spirits and are, really out there in the safety community, trying to help the whole person. The whole person, not just part of the person, but the whole person, to include people that sometimes haven't gotten the opportunities, haven't gotten the resource, connection, and access that they probably should have had. And so, again, thank you so much. And again, we will definitely, I definitely want to make sure that we share your podcast and your information with others. And so again, for those who are listening, obviously you found us. And we have a new episode that comes out every Friday. They actually come out on Thursdays over in Australia, because we seem to have lots of followers there. But again, you can follow me on LinkedIn as well. You can certainly, I do have a website that you can go to, ID2 Solutions. Go to my website there. But you can follow these episodes on the Flourish DX YouTube page. So Flourish DX is the company that really is kind of behind the scenes. I don't talk about them all that often because they're doing this just to be great citizens. But I certainly do appreciate their support. So you can go to the Flourish DX YouTube page and you can see actually the interaction between me and the guest. And I just look forward to you continuing to follow us. Our followership list is getting longer and longer, and we're always happy to have you joining in with us each week to find out what's new in psychological health and safety here in the United States. So for this episode, again, thanks, Yara Carrillo, for joining us. And we'll look forward to those of you who are following and listening and watching on the next episode of the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. Thanks very much.
Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. To stay up to date with the best content on workplace mental health in America, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and join the Flourish DX community at www.flourishdx.com.